Before I share this story, I'll preface it by saying that I am not the author, and nor is my grandfather. After his passing, I found this amongst his belongings. Pieced together from torn and water-damaged scraps of paper were the last words of a man lost at sea. Alongside the tale was a glass bottle. Supposedly, this is the bottle that the story washed up ashore in. I will presume this tale to be real, instead of some elaborate piece of fiction, as my grandfather insisted upon this in his accompanying notes. Without wasting any more of your time, I will now type out the story to the best of my abilities. Forgive me if some details are inaccurate. The handwriting is already bad, and almost illegible in some places due to water damage. I will use my grandfather's speculative notes to assist me in places where the water damage is too great. Let's begin. To whomever finds this note, be sure to keep it to yourself. I've a need to tell someone of my fate, but I wish not for my beloved to know of the tragedy that befell me. I'd rather she believed our ship was capsized, that we all drowned in the frozen hellscape of the Atlantic. I shall surely perish out here. Whether I drown, starve, or be eaten, I hope it will bring me peace. I want not for my own demise, I'll make that much clear, but I no longer fear it. As a last remark, before I begin, let it be known that I don't hold a grudge against anyone. I pray their souls feel the same about me. None of us were brave men, not on that day, and least of all me. My name is Elias Edwards. I am 26, and the year is 1846. I will die at sea, as have all but one of my shipmates. We set sail from the Bristol City docks. We've a history of seafaring men in town, and whoever reads this will surely recognise us as the city that bestowed Blackbeard upon the world. With that sort of history, it is no wonder we've so many fishermen and merchants clambering for a chance at sailing the high seas. We were a crew of 150 men, each of us very capable. As our ship was presently the brawniest of the seaworthy bunch at Bristol City docks, the academics at the University of Oxford had arranged for us to keep watch over a young scholar. He had been developing a device that would revolutionise seafaring, as they boldly claimed. The young lad, definitely no more than 21, was named Henry Clark. I had expected Henry to be a meek academic. I'd known the type, scrawny, with such a penchant for all things scientific that he'd sooner be caught in bed with a book than a woman. But Henry gave a different impression. He fit in well with the crew, and we almost forgot that he was there for a reason other than pay. We had all said our farewells and see you soons to our betrothed, beloveds, firstborns and mothers, each man to whomever it was that he cared for the most in this world. And so we journeyed out to the Americas. Our ship was well stocked, and we carried with us crates of goods to be sold to the Yanks. As our ship cleared her path out to sea, and the bustling docks melted away into the distance, a number of the men began a mild teasing of Henry. Despite his friendly disposition, nothing was enough to save him from the mockery that one who had not found their sea legs would receive. Among the group was my cousin. He too was a member of the crew. Albert Edwards, a little older than I, patted Henry on the back as the jest subsided. "Happens to everyone," he reassured Henry. I went over to greet Albert, but stopped when I saw Henry pull a strange box from his pocket. My cousin and the others were fascinated by the machine too, and we all began to gather around the scholar. I can't quite describe best how the machine looked. I've no knowledge of steam engines or any other such mechanics. There were blinking flashes of red and green along one side, and on its front were a series of levers and switches that did only God knows what. A rectangle above the switches showed numbers that changed, 6 digits that increased and decreased, for some reason unknown to me. Albert went to touch the box, but Henry quickly pulled it away. "We have to be very careful with this." Henry refused to let anyone else touch it, but was more than happy for us to look. This new mystery device, the one that would revolutionize seafaring, soon became the talk of the whole crew. Many of us speculated upon how it worked, but none of us quite understood when Henry explained it. He told us to rest assured that one day, nobody would set sail without one. While none of us could understand how it worked, Henry told us what it did. He said that its use was to pinpoint your exact position on the globe, and that's what the numbers meant. We were all amazed, but after a number of days spent sailing, we carried on with our normal duties and forgot about Henry's box. I shan't bore you with the details of ship life. The next 2 weeks were uneventful. There were no skirmishes with marauders or freebooters, no gunfights with other ships. Our cannons were covered with dust. I wasn't certain they'd ever known the joy of firing. The captain ran a tight ship, but enjoyed the company of a relaxed crew, so we entertained ourselves by playing cards and other such things when our attention wasn't required. It was also a common occurrence for 1 or 2 items of freight to go missing from time to time. This trip it happened to be a few bottles of cider. We allowed ourselves to get merry on the drink we had brought, and every now and again on the drinks we were supposed to be delivering. On a night in the middle of the Atlantic, Albert and I sat on the deck. I procured a bottle of cider, and Albert cracked into a bottle of rum that he had stowed away below deck. We sat, bottles in hand, eyes up at the night sky. The blazes of stars lit the way for our journey, and we marvelled in the beauty of a thing that we had seen 1,000 times. But both of us, without saying a word, knew that the stars we looked at that night would be the same stars our wives looked at when night came for them. We spent some time watching, drinking. The ambient sounds of the ocean and creaking wood of the ship did well rocking us to relax on that still night. Some time passed before either of us spoke. "When we get this far out," my cousin said, "it's not nice to be away." "Well, we've done it plenty of times." "Yeah, you're right. But I've got a boy now." Albert and his wife had their firstborn not long before we set sail. As hard as it made him feel, he had to leave her with their little William. We all need money, and with an extra mouth to feed, he needed it more than ever. We spoke about fatherhood, Albert's newfound trials and tribulations, before Henry came to join us. "You should come and look at this." We each turned to face him, then followed him to the side of the ship. Henry peered over the side and we followed suit. Beneath us was the ocean black, a glistening mirage of stars floating on its surface. "What are we looking at, Henry?" I asked. Henry pulled his box from his pocket. The red light flickered and flashed like a flame blown by the wind. It made a repetitive ding, which sounded like the bell of a bicycle or some such noise. He watched the numbers closely. "There's something strange beneath us," he said. By this time, I had just about finished my cider. Henry asked me to drop the bottle into the ocean upon my finishing it. I swigged the dregs of my drink and dropped the bottle into the sea. It splashed against the surface, then sunk rapidly down, and as it did so, the waters around it were ablaze with a golden hue. A perfect, fantastic gold. "Wow, that's incredible. What's that there, then?" my cousin said. We thought about what it might be before Henry hatched a plan. Albert recovered his empty, discarded rum bottle and found some rope, and some of the other men crowded around us to watch. Albert held the rope, and I fastened the other end of it securely to the bottle. We lowered it down the side of the boat and into the ocean. It swung and tugged in the breeze, but Albert held a steady hand. The moment it touched the water, a web of gold echoed about it. A subtle humming filled the air, while we allowed the bottle to be filled with ocean water. I gazed upon the returning bottle filled with that flowing, glowing gold, and I felt inexplicably drawn to it. We all crowded around Albert as he pulled the bottle up the side of the ship. Some of the golden waters were sloshed around the outside of the bottle. Coiling the rope in one hand, Albert finally dangled the bottle onto the deck. "Nobody touch it," Henry warned. "We need to see what it is first." The crowd that had gathered grumbled at his caution, myself included. We all must have felt the same pull, the same yearning for the golden water. Albert, who had become quite drunk on his rum, complained that it was his bottle, and he should be able to do what he wanted with it. Henry ignored the rabble and unveiled a second device. Much like the first box we had all seen, this second one was of an equally confusing nature. Extending from one side of it was a glass appendage, which Henry dunked into the top of the bottle. It filled itself with the golden liquid. "This tells me what it is," he informed us. While Henry was looking at the device he had kept hidden from us until this point, the golden glow within the bottle, and that which was dripping from its sides, had simmered down. It had faded and appeared as if it were regular water of the ocean. The crowd had lulled, but Albert reached forwards to the bottle, noting aloud in a drunken slur the obvious fact that it had faded. He placed his thumb over the mouth of the bottle and shook it. Sure enough, the water inside began to sparkle again, and with that same dazzling gold. So did Albert's hand as he took it away from the still wet bottleneck. The tip of his thumb was bright and golden. A number of the men laughed, and so did Albert, but his laugh slowly grew nervous before falling silent. He began to scratch at his hand to try and wipe off the gold, but all he did was spread it to his other hand. Albert scratched and scratched. His breath became snatched. I asked him what was wrong. "Don't touch me!" my cousin screamed as both myself and others tried to help him and see what was the matter. He panicked, whirling about before he began to wail in pain. Alongside Albert's screams was that same humming chorus, rumbling and ominous. I wanted to help Albert, but I was terrified of going near him. I knew that the rest of the crew felt the same. He flailed about, winding and twisting himself around and around as he desperately tried to remove the golden waters from himself. But all he could do was spread it further. Albert's skin began to bubble, began to pop, and even began to fall off. Flesh dripped from my dear cousin's arms as he begged God for mercy. One man tried to throw some of his alcohol over Albert to wash away the gold, but it didn't work. I winced and turned away from the scene. The constitution of my stomach was not enough to behold the sight any longer. In the commotion, with my hand held before my mouth and facing away, I noticed Henry, skulking behind the mast. "Where are you off to?" I called over the screams and humming, dashing over to him. I told everyone not to touch it. "I'm leaving," he said, flicking the levers and dials on a device of his. I went to reach towards him, to grab him and tell him to explain himself. Perhaps it was a mix of the alcohol and all the panic in the air, but I swear I saw Henry vanish before my very eyes. Like a spectre, he disappeared. I know not how, but it must have been something to do with this device. I was stood in shock for a moment, trying to understand how a man could do such a thing. It was as if he flicked a switch on his box, then folded into himself, as if he was being crunched and eaten by some invisible beast. He folded and folded all within the space of a second until he was no more, gone. While I was preoccupied, being completely dumbfounded by what had happened with Henry, the ship had fallen into complete disarray. The alcohol that someone had thrown onto Albert had facilitated the spread of the gold, and in all of the confusion someone must have knocked the first bottle over. I quickly climbed the rigging and saw others following in my footsteps. Hand over hand, foot over foot, I scrambled my way up and perched atop the crow's nest. Cannon fire blared beneath the screaming and humming on deck, and I looked down around at the chaos that unfolded before me. There was a terrible golden mist that slithered up the side of the boat, reaching at us and clawing its way ever closer. It moved slowly, yet we couldn't outrun it. There was nowhere to run to. Slowly but strongly, the sea spray stuttered and juddered its way above and over the walls of the ship, engulfing the bow and marking men for dead with its gentlest touch. Men with melting flesh climbed to reach me, but fell back to the deck as the searing pain became too much for them. As strange as it sounds, there was forever an allure about the golden mist that fluttered in the wind. Though I saw it burn through whatever it met, I felt a desire to reach out below the crow's nest and touch it. I was wise enough to refrain from doing so, but something about the mist could draw men in. Pandemonium was unleashed below me by the onslaught of the golden mist, which reached just below my perch. I sat terrified as I waited for everything to stop. The screaming, the humming, the cannon fire had ceased, likely as soon as the operators realized how fruitless an effort it was to fire a cannon at mist and water. The ship had begun to violently rock side to side until I could no longer peek over the side of the crow's nest for fear of falling to my death. Be it the mist or the impact that took me, I desired neither. I hunkered down and crouched hidden, surrounded by the small circle of wood that acted as my final wall of protection. I was wobbled by the rocking of the ship, and I tried to hold myself still, but the rocking soon became so violent that I was thrown back and forth by the assault. I cowered in my hiding hole, too timid to face the horrors below, dwelling upon the thought that my friends among the crew, and my dearest cousin Albert, had by now all fallen apart by the will of the golden mist. From that point onwards, my memories are terribly ill-defined. I must have hit my head while I was being flung by the rocking of the boat. I have no idea how this came to pass, but when I awoke amidst the scattered, floating wreckage of the ship, I was still afloat myself in the bucket-shaped crow's nest. Among the floating debris were some crates. Gifted to me in them are the parchments on which I have written this message, and the bottle in which I will seal this message. And of course, plenty of cider to keep me company in my final days, though God knows how much of the beloved stuff we've lost to the sea floor. Make no mistake, I wish I could have helped even just one soul, but to see a man's flesh fall from his bones as if he were well-cooked meat is enough to send the bravest of men into a blind panic. So please, cousin, hold no grudge against me for my cowardice. I am serving my punishment, withering away to nothing, while drifting aimlessly through the barren ocean blue. I'm growing weary as I write now. I'm sensing that the end is near. Whoever finds this, wherever it may wash ashore, thank you for letting me share my story with you. I shall now drink the remainder of that which floats with me. If you would be so kind, have a drink with me as you read my final farewell. Elias Edwards. Unfortunately, a lot is left unanswered by Elias. My grandfather's notes focus heavily on working out what the golden mist was, with the avenues he has explored being related to bioluminescent plankton, various microbes, and even the mythological sirens. He also focuses very intently on Henry Clark and working out how he disappeared, though with the fact that Elias had been drinking and had hit his head, I can't be certain whether any of this really happened.